Hello everyone, my name is Korosh Erfani and I am sociologist and the writer of the book Infinitylogy, which is about the utilization of infinity in our real world in order to change it. So we know that the infinity had been a very old and discussed concept among the philosophers, scientists, and knowledgeable people. But for thousands and thousand years, we talked about the infinity without thinking about how we can maybe apply this concept in our real life and to use it for the different applications that can produce something useful to us. The reason for which we couldn't do that is that the infinity is just a concept. Its reality is not something tangible, it's not something experimental, right? We cannot really see or go through something material that can represent the infinity. But what we can know is an understanding of this concept, which means that we are dealing with the comprehension of the presence of infinity in the structure of matter. So that's why we got used to deal only with the materials, with the material world, and we didn't really go over the idea of that if there is something called infinity, where we can find it and how we can use it. So we didn't do that, but recently, in the recent decades, we started to think about it. And one of the attempts to suggest this idea of the utility of infinity is done by those who think that there would be maybe somewhere and somehow the possibility of finding a kind of presence of infinity that can be used, that can be worked. Infinitism is a recent attempt to theorize that. We presented infinitism as a philosophical theory. So the substance of this theory is philosophical, which means it tries to treat, the global and the general aspect of the things, and at the same time, it's a theory, which means a structured and systemic presentation of concept and ideas. So this is a philosophical frame that we invented in order to know how to deal with the infinity. So as we cannot find the materialization or the crystallization of the infinity, we can think about where the infinity is running, when it is going on, when it is operating. And from that moment, we would be able to see how maybe we can, go in parallel with that and find the opportunity to do something, to do some change on the material world, where effectively we create a kind of alteration that would be beneficial to us. We know that the matter is going on forever. It had been going on forever. It's going on constantly, and it will be going on endlessly. So this is the reality of infinity in the matter. Whatever is the category or the segment of the matter that you choose, whatever is the example or the case of matter, anyway, you have this possibility to see the presence of the infinitude in that example, in that sample, for example. So, because of that, we see that the common characteristic of the material world is infinitude. Infinitude of its structure, infinitude of its configuration, infinitude of its mechanism by which the matter exists even. So, because we can find this presence of infinitude in the matter, we can ask ourselves where this infinitude is actually going on, where we can find that. So, infinitism is suggesting that you can find it in two things. First, in the component of a thing, whatever is the phenomenon you are studying, you can be sure that it is composed of some component, right? So the idea that there would be some maybe particle or subparticle that are not done of anything or from anything, that are only and only themselves, is just the representation of our ignorance on the real structure of the matter, right? Because they are, for example, talking about the electron, telling us that the electron doesn't have any component and is it's only and only itself. But we will see in the future that the same mistake that had been committed, that had been done before, is being done right now by this vision on the electron. And in the future, we would discover the components of the electron. Now, everything has the components. Everything is made of some pieces, some elements, that in as a generic word we use the word component, right? So where we can find the infinity? First, in the number of the component of a phenomenon. And we know that the number is just infinite. What does it mean? It means that if you take one of the components that constitute a phenomenon, and if you break it down, you will find what we can call, for example, the subcomponent of that component, right? And if we take one of these subcomponents and we break it down, we will find some details on that. This is, for example, the subcomponents. And the idea of infinitism is very simple. It's telling us that if you keep going, you can go forever. This is an endless process of finding the smaller and smaller, level by level, step by step, the new subcomponents. Imagine that when we apply it to the subatomic particle. We are talking about the very, very small elements, but there is no and there is never smallest. In the process of understanding of infinity, we should remove completely this adjective of most, the smallest and the tiniest or the things like that completely from our dictionary. There would be always and always smaller element. For how many components, for how long? So the answer is very simple. There is no any limitation. There is no end limit. There is no end point. So if you want to discover more and more about the structure and substructure of the particles, you can go and you will never stop. Why? Because there would be always some new sub-elements to be discovered. The reason for which we cannot really see them or treat them, it's not because they don't exist, it's because we don't have the tools to see them, to find them, you know, to observe them. So, but theoretically, we can imagine, we can conceive this structure in such a way that it's going down, you know. And don't forget that we are talking about the micro direction, which means going toward the smaller and smaller level, smaller and smaller particles, or you can go in the macro direction, bigger and bigger, but never the biggest. Doesn't exist at all. The biggest and the smallest don't exist. We have just smaller and smaller and smaller, infinitely, and bigger and bigger and bigger, endlessly. So that's the first idea of the presence of the infinity in the structure of matter. The second one is the number of the interaction and interrelations between these components. There, again, you won't find any mathematical number able to illustrate how many interrelations you have between all these components and the subcomponents we are talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not because a big number that we cannot figure out. It's because there is no big number when we are talking about the infinity. Infinity doesn't contain any number. It cannot contain any precise quantity, any fixed quantity. It's an evolving quantity. It's an evolving number. Infinity has this characteristic that it contains the changing and the increasing and the growing number. So, two field or two sphere to detect the presence of infinity. First, in the number of the components, and second, in the number of the connection and interconnection between these components. All right. We know that these two aspects are, touching the infinitude, the endlessness, and that's why we cannot really hope that one day we will touch the end. There is no end. So, which means that the only thing that we can do is going through this process, through this endless way, and just keep going. Thanks to science, we can get more and more acquaintance, knowledge, familiarity with this structure, and thanks to the technology, we can effectively do that, and also we can try to see where it would be possible to have some mechanical, material, operational involvement. how we can be engaged in this infinite process, engaged operationally, practically. Why it is important to find the points in which we can intervene and we can start to have some operation or action. It's because based on the theory of infinitism, by going through these levels, level after levels, level, sub-level, and we can say sub-levels, we can find, when it's a question of the different category of matter, everything that we can take as liquid or gas or any hard things, we have this possibility to compare the hierarchy of these levels and sub-levels of the components. We have the possibility to compare the patterns of the interaction and interconnection between these subcomponents. And if we have the technology, hardware and software, to try to match, try to see and to detect the given level of this hierarchy that match for two different phenomena, two different things. For example, oil and coil, for example. For metal and glass, for example. It is possible to go through these substructures and find at a given moment the possibility of the levels that are more or less identical, not only similar, because the similarity starts with the levels that are not as deep as we are thinking about or talking about, right? Just by going through the subatomic elements, we can find the great similarity for a lot of different kinds of matter, right? The different kinds of material structures. I am talking about the much deeper level. But at a given level, for these two different phenomena we are talking about, we can find the identity, the identical structure. It could be the identical component, the identical number of the component, the identical number of interaction or kind of interaction, and there, that would be possible to take it as a starting point for changing the process, and bringing it toward an upper level that would be the same for these two phenomena. Which means that when we find the first identical level, that would be a possibility, that would be an opportunity to start our intervention, operate on one of them in order to turn it into another phenomenon, to another thing. Which means that we want to make a kind of surgery, chirurgical operation on what? On the substructure of the matter of a precise kind of or a given kind of material. At that moment, it would be possible to change, this structure, to change the arrangement of these components or the orientation of the interactions in such a way that instead of phenomenon A, we get the starting process of turning it into the phenomenon B. This is a kind of substructural intervention, substructural transformation. And that can give us an idea about how, by spending our money on developing the knowledge and the technology for reaching that point, could be a very good way, very good choice to arrive to such a capability that we can then change our civilization, change the fate of the humanity. Why? Because if we can reach this ability, this capability, it means that we can take anything that is available, that is abundant, and we can go through its substructure, find the convenient and suitable level in order to start to operate and to change it, to arrive to whatever we want. You know, it's like the genetic codes or the DNA of the matter. If you know how to operate that, how to change it, how to transform it, you can alter it to whatever you want, right? By integrating the new component, by changing the component, by changing the arrangement of the component, the configuration of the components, or changing the network of relationship between these components. We are far from that. We know this, right? We are very far from that. But this is not the task of the science to do so, you know, to go through this process, nor technology. Science and technology are the tools, are the knowledge of specific fields. The only tool that we have to orient us toward this direction is the philosophy. The philosophy can do that. Philosophy goes beyond the cases, right? The samples, the concrete points, and can effectively have an abstract understanding of the whole thing, you know, the world, nature, universe. The philosophy is the only branch able to talk about the existence, you know. And then, once we have this philosophical vision, we can direct science and technology in that direction, in that pathway. So, infinitism is presenting itself as the philosophical ground for doing that. We need effectively a general theory that goes even beyond the theory of everything, that the science is trying to get there, but we know that the science can never get there without philosophy. But I mean, by this existential perspective, the philosophy is drawing, right, is designing for us. We can have a compass, and then we can navigate through the micro and macro universe. So that's why infinitism with this idea needs a very strong theoretical basis that will provide the matter, provide, the content, in order the infinitism can, go in this way and show the way also to the science and to the technology. So the factory of production of knowledge about the infinity is called Infinitylogy. So that's why we need, in the one hand, Infinitylogy in order to produce the theoretical acquaintance, the theoretical knowledge about the infinity, and we need also the infinitism in order to use it, to apply it. So infinitism is the utilitarian work that we can exercise on the production and the outcome of what the Infinitylogy can do. And you see how complementary are Infinitylogy and infinitism. Infinitylogy will produce the knowledge, and infinitism will use this knowledge. And thanks to this knowledge, it can direct, it can instruct science and technology to go, in this very interesting and useful path, and produce everything the humanity and the human civilization needs to prosper, to advance. That's the end of the scarcity. That's the end of, limited resources that we are kind of victim, we are prisoner of. We will be released of any idea of the scarcity, any idea of the limitation or the end point. And then we can start to experience the real freedom. The real freedom is an existential freedom. It's not social and political only. That would be an existential one, which means that we can change the level of our historical and real or material existence. We can go toward the new level, new horizon of the human existence. It's possible if we believe in it, but believing, on the fact, based on the factual and material grounds. We can do that. And that's why we suggested infinitism for a framework to do so. I hope that you will also participate in this discussion, and together we can use the collective wisdom, collective understanding to see if it is possible or not, if not why, if yes how, and then to move forward together to change the humanity's fate, the humanity's future. Thank you very much for watching this video, and we will be in touch. Thank you.